I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm joining Mark McCune, Ed Anton, and Shawn Wooten, and we're recapping Greek Week, Day 3 in Thessalonica, Greece.
Greek Week.
Join me as we talk about the impact and the power of seeing sites that are thousands and thousands of years old and indicated in the Bible. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast.
Epic.
Yes.
Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches.
Guys, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It is great. Okay, we are at our final day in Thessalonica or Thessaloniki, and it's just been a game changer for me. I can't wait to talk about the last 3 days. And it's just been so much fun. Yeah. But why don't we first just dive right in and talk about our trip yesterday? Shawn, where'd you take us yesterday on that bus?
Oh, well, we went to Philippi. Unbelievable. And I'll actually let Ed fill in all those details. Really, Ed has been the architect of the places to go, the things to see. And really appreciate that, but it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
It was amazing. Well, I kind of expected Philippi to be like Thessaloniki, which is a modern city set over on top of an ancient city. The first day we're right in the middle of town, and then Ed's like, "Hey, you can't hear me, but right there is where Paul was, brought into trial or whatever." But this was totally different. Ed, can you kind of paint the picture in the listener's mind of what we saw yesterday?
Yeah, so there is a archaeological site, a active archaeological dig going on in Philippi, and it's very different from Thessaloniki. Thessaloniki, we just have some ruins in the middle of a city. There we actually have a dedicated site, and it's actually quite isolated from any of the other towns or anything. So,
right.
Yeah, rather interesting that we could actually kind of go in there and really begin to try to imagine it the way that it was back then.
Do you happen to know when they discovered that site?
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's out in the middle of nowhere. You kind of go, what? Just a bunch of blocks, which
probably explains why nobody's there right now. This Thessalonica is right on the port. It's beautiful.
Oh, it's
city.
cool.
The commerce that must go through here today.
It's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So,
and Philippi was a small town even back in biblical times, maybe only 5,000 people.
Right, exactly. Okay, talk about the biblical significance of Philippi. Why was it a big deal for those listening?
Well, sure. It's the first spot, of course, that Paul lands. It's a big deal because he breaks from his custom of going to synagogues. Matter of fact, he'll leave Philippi and go to Amphipolis and Apollonia, pass over those places, wait till he gets to Thessaloniki, where there's a synagogue, as was his custom, we'll go in. Same thing with Berea. But he breaks with that custom in Philippi, but it's also the first landing spot, the first city, the first beachhead in all of Eastern Europe.
Okay, for those who are challenged geographically, it all seems to tie together. Why is this area the first part of Europe? I mean, when you look at it on a big map, you go, well, it all seems connected. How is it defined geographically? Why is this significant?
So we've got that continental divide. It kind of runs right through Istanbul, really.
Okay.
But in the Bible, though, we see them in Asia Minor or Turkey. And as they're making their way through, doing some very productive work, right? They've just received the letter from Acts 15. The Gentiles, the Jews, are all encouraged by the letter. The church is growing in health and numbers, it says. But then all of a sudden, their work is disrupted by a vision in the night by a man of Macedonia beckoning them to come. And there he is with a plaintive cry, "Come and help us." Paul turns on a dime, and they get on a boat, go to Samothrace, which is an island in between the two continents. It's just a small continental divide here between Turkey and Greece. And then they land in Philippi. Now, on a map, it doesn't look like it's that big of a deal. Kind of like Eurasia. You don't
Right.
necessarily see along the Ural Mountains.
Right.
Where is that dividing line?
Right.
It's a little bit so here, but we do have a break in the landmass.
Right. It's like the gap there, the Dardanelles there, right around Istanbul. There is a very slender strip of water that goes up into the Black Sea. I'm assuming that's kind of the gap.
The Bosphorus, right?
Where the boss, exactly. So anyway, so he gets called over. He goes through Neapolis, and then he ends up in Philippi. Mark, when you were there, what were your initial impressions of walking into the ruins of Philippi?
Oh, just incredible. First of all, it was way bigger. It was an expansive, like Ed said, just a live dig. But just to walk in on the Ignatian Way and have these big marble stones and all the earth, a lot of it had been washed away, but just like kind of walking from stone to stone, it was stunning.
It was amazing.
Just to think about, the Romans, they did have it going on as far as the infrastructure.
Yep.
Little did anybody know that, thousands of years later, we'd be walking these same roads.
I know that whole thing. Can you talk a little bit? You've mentioned the Ignatian Way a ton, Ed. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of that road?
So it is this big east-west road. It's kind of the road besides the Appian Way in ancient Rome. But the Ignatian Way, starts where we started there in Neapolis. You go north and you hit the Ignatian Way, and it brings you all the way over to the design of it was to link the western edge of the empire all the way over at Constantinople, later Istanbul today, but then all the way over to Albania, basically, and then take the boat across and get over to Rome.
Right. It was Mark, just like you shared, I couldn't believe I was walking on the road that Paul walked on. I mean, it's just crazy, and these massive stones.
Yeah.
You're right. The dirt filling around the mortar, so to speak, or the grout was kind of washed away. But these stones were just phenomenally big and heavy.
Yeah.
And it made me think God had a plan, because it reminded me of the movie The Wizard of Oz. She said, follow the yellow brick road. Basically all she had to do was just follow the road, and she was going to get to Oz. And I wonder if Paul had the same kind of thing, like, all I got to do is follow this road. I'm going to get to Rome someday and hit all the cities along. It would definitely remove additional choices along the way. What were your thoughts when you walked into Philippi, Shawn?
No, it was a little bigger than I thought it'd be.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing the theater. I loved seeing the jail. It's very impressive. And then to hear the backstory, which I don't know if Ed's going to go into this podcast or not, but that was basically a city established by veterans who were just feeling so much grace that they weren't just conquered, but they have citizenship.
Right.
And we also could just be conquered. Like in our lives, we're just happy to be servants of God, but He gives us citizenship. He gives us sonship. There's an adoption involved, which blows my mind. That was kind of the impression.
Ed, can you give the 3-minute recap on your 30-minute lesson from yesterday?
Let's do it. And then listen to this podcast at 2 times speed. So Philippi is a city built on grace. Even before Christ, it was a city built on grace. Augustus could have vanquished the armies that were insurrectionists, in a sense, against him. But instead of vanquishing them, he gave them citizenship in Philippi, gave them land. It was a huge gift of grace that left that whole town not just incredibly grateful, but patriotic and loyal, deeply loyal. We have imperial cult worship of Augustus all throughout the area, deep loyalty bonds. So it's kind of amazing that Paul could come in there, doesn't have a beachhead of a synagogue, only has these fiercely loyal veterans tied deeply to Rome and to Augustus, and he's able to transfer their allegiance from Caesar to Christ.
It's amazing.
And he does. But there's a kicker to it, because these aren't just any veterans. These are veterans of the 6th Legion, the Iron Legion. And they didn't just serve anywhere before they came to Philippi to retire. They did travel, but the main place where they were stationed was Judea. They were in Sepphoris when Jesus was a boy. They would have seen his character. They would have seen him grow in stature and wisdom and grace, as Luke says. They would have marveled perhaps at him through his life. And then later, they would have been the troops stationed there in Caesarea with Pontius Pilate, being deployed into Jerusalem feast after feast to make sure that the rebel Judeans didn't revolt during those times. And they would have been there. And one of them may have been that centurion who saw Jesus on the cross and say, surely this man was the Son of God. So they're all
The same legion. That drove the spear through his side.
I don't know if it's only the 6th Legion that's in Jerusalem at that time, but I don't imagine there's multiple legions. So I don't know that part exactly, but I do know the 6th Legion was in Jerusalem, was in Sepphoris, was in Judea at that time. And by the way, when would they be retirement age? Probably around 50 AD. They've probably already now settled up in Philippi.
Wow.
So Paul comes into this area not just with any incredibly loyal Romans, but loyal Romans who may have had a splinter in the back of their mind saying, I remember this guy.
Right.
I remember this guy. I missed my opportunity down there.
Right.
But holy smokes, it's coming back to me again. And then, you read the letter to Philippians. This is an amazing church.
Yeah.
And that deep well of gratitude that was misplaced with Augustus now got placed right with Jesus. And we see that Jesus is so much greater than Augustus in the great hymn of the Philippians chapter 2.
Right. You are pretty convinced that the site that we saw yesterday is the actual site where Paul was imprisoned. Can you tell me why you think that?
It's really just, hearing it from various archaeologists that have worked on the site and different people that have helped us, as experts in the field as we've gone to tour there. It seems to fit rather well. There's an agora, there's a forum. An agora is a marketplace. A forum is more of a governmental center. Much of what we saw was the forum. And it seems that right on the edge of the bema would have been the prison. All of those things, according to those that have studied it, seem to kind of foot well with the way that might have worked.
It looked formidable. It was so... It was kind of a box shape. And the room was, I would say, no bigger than 10 by 10, probably smaller than that. But the walls were probably 2 feet to 3 feet deep. Wide. There's no way you're escaping. Yeah. It just made me think how terrifying it must have been to have an earthquake in there. What were your thoughts as you saw that prison?
There were probably maybe boulders coming down from the roof. They're covering for their lives. Yeah, to me it almost looked like a cave with an iron gate right in front of it.
I think the iron gate was added later.
Yes.
I don't think so.
And the printed sign.
What about the sign that said this is Paul's prison? They got it ready for me. Any thoughts for you about the prison?
I think it was just a moving moment because as we were singing a song before Ed preached, I went over to the prison and took a little video from the prison door to this fellowship singing hymns. And you just think,
amen.
What causes me to lose my joy?
Yeah.
Where do I lose my joy? At what point do I say, is it okay for me just to lose my joy?
Right.
Like these circumstances are too hard.
Right.
And there's a lot of hard circumstances on our planet today. But I think Paul had that joy no matter what was going on. So
I was having a quiet time this morning and praying about it, and I just thought, if a man is willing to go and be thrown into a jail and then sing hymns while he's in jail, after he's just been, as Ed said, severely beaten,
severely flogged.
Like what was the word? Overflowing.
Polos, overabundance of flogging.
He just was beaten to a pulp, and then still singing. Was Silas in the prison? Mm-hmm. You're not going to stop this kind of guy. There's no way to stop the gospel. It just made me, it was very humbling and at the same time convicting. And I just thought, okay, you've got to let go of boundaries in your mind of what you won't do for Christ.
Yeah.
And it just was like, wow, okay, this is the reason why the gospel spread, because this guy is just could not be beat. It was just crazy.
That was an emotional moment for me. And even just before I got up, it was very much an emotional moment to realize, wow, we're singing hymns, right, where they sang hymns.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, we're a shadow of what they were actually experiencing, but nonetheless, to somehow just get a little bit close to that heroism and that faith was so encouraging.
So encouraging.
Yeah. And to be so focused and like stay on his mission, right after that, they go to the Philippian Jailer's home, right? He's sharing his faith.
good point.
Family becomes disciples. It was like this incredible night that just unfolded before them following this earthquake.
Exactly.
Just incredible.
Exactly. Let's talk a little.
Can I share one more thing too about the Philippians?
Yes.
So we hear about them, of course, in Acts 16. Then we hear about them later in the letter to the Philippians. But they're also the feature of 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. And that's a huge feature because that's Paul helping the Corinthian church have a standard bearer for what it is to be engaged in the great gift of grace. That great gift of grace spurs generosity within us because gratitude wells up. It's a beautiful dance that occurs. And he says of the Philippians, out of your great struggles and severe afflictions, you had a joy to join in us in being able to give to God's people. You gave first to God and then to God's people. But of course, it all begins with Jesus, though rich, plunged himself into poverty so that we could become rich.
Right.
And that through our riches, we could become generous in every way.
Yeah.
And they're the ultimate church to actually really model what it looks like to have grace impact us so very deeply,
right,
where we spring out of that grace with gratitude and generosity,
right,
with no limits of what we want to do for Jesus.
Right. Well, you mentioned perhaps the person that set the pace for the church was their first convert, Lydia. And we moved over after looking at the prison, then we went over to the river.
Yeah, cool site, right?
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Again, I'm not sure. I haven't, tried to fact check the studies, but people feel like that's a pretty good spot of where the tributary off the river would have been, where the Jews would have had that little gathering of worship. Not enough for a synagogue, not enough, no 10 Jewish men in order to pull that off. But nonetheless, there they are. A man from Macedonia calls you to Eastern Europe and you arrive and what do you find? Women. I also find that's really great, right? That the gospel does feature women so prominently. But nonetheless, to have a woman of perhaps such prominence running in those circles of dealing in purple cloth. And I love that passage where it says, and the Lord opened her heart to receive the message. Mm-hmm. And we all took a moment to reflect on how God opened our hearts.
That's right. That was
right?
cool.
And there's a theological term. Does God do that immediately or immediately? Immediately means he does it through mediation. Immediately means he does it not through any mediation. But God does do it immediately, right? He uses people. He uses conditions. He uses a sermon. He uses the scriptures. And certainly Paul bringing the good news, right? There was messianic fever spread throughout all of the Jewish communities. Where is this Messiah? How does this Messiah come to us? What will be the way that we know? And Paul's able to bring all of that to her. And of course, that opened her heart to receive the message. And quickly wanted to be baptized into Christ.
Shawn, what do you think the impact this is having on all your participants, your Revive team members?
Well, I think what I love about our community is that I think we have a good balance. We had some extraordinary teaching and then immersion of being in this environment. And then you have these bus rides where they're sitting in pairs thinking, praying, talking, sharing. And then there's some legendary disciples in their presence as well, older brothers and sisters that they can sit with and hear your stories and talk with you. And then there's meals they share. And then you're driving and seeing the Greek coast. And it's like, this is like an 8D movie. Like this is all immersion. And, all of our prayers is always that it just fills us up and then it overflows, right? That stranger sitting on the bus next to me in 3 days, he'll sense something. Like I can talk with him. My picture's clear of what God has put me on this planet for.
Right. It's so cool. I mean, just spending 3 days straight on a bus. I walked in there on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, didn't know anybody. And yet within about 24 hours, I know 50 new people, which is just by name. And it's so encouraging, just giving them hugs. Ed, this is not your first time to these sites, it's your second time, but you shared a story about how you kind of just stumbled onto these sites that we're touring this week. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you here?
So, normally a lot of the tours that are kind of prepackaged don't really come through Macedonia. You hit Athens, you hit Corinth, you go over to Ephesus, maybe some of the 7 churches, Patmos, but not normally Philippi and Thessalonica, and certainly not Berea. But years ago, when we were planning a tour, we had a diplomatic route between Turkey and the U.S., and we had to, at the last minute, call an audible, and we couldn't go to the Turkey sites. So rather than go there, we had to fill in the tour with something else. We filled it in with Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea. Thank God we did. It's so amazing. But we had a different tour guide for those 3 sites. And then afterwards, we had this amazing tour guide that caught up with us in Athens. Just like Paul's missionary journey, we left Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea and went down to Athens. We met him in Athens, and when he was there, he said, "Hey, did you happen to see this stone in Philippi that really commemorated the 6th Legion?" And he's the one who connected all those dots. As a matter of fact, I think he's doing a dissertation on that.
Wow.
And I remember from that time in 2019 thinking, oh man, I wish we had him. I wish I had seen that stone with my own eyes. I wish I'd seen that connection that those soldiers down in Jerusalem that maybe kind of had been yearning for Jesus and missed their chance at him, got him again later. I wish I'd seen that stone that showed that all of that's the case. And so this time I was like, I want to find that stone. As a matter of fact, I called the tour guide. I said, do you know where it is? He goes, looks somewhere there. But that wasn't much help. I get there. I asked 3 different employees of the archaeological site, as well as 2 other tour guides. No one had any idea. I remember walking down the Ignatian Way and walking into the forum and praying. And it's a big forum, right? Lots of stones. And the very first stone that I look at actually has the inscription to the 6th Legion. I was like, this is me waiting so many years. And the very first, and I really didn't know we were going to see it.
I saw you standing between the 2 stones, and you were gesticulating. You were so excited.
Yes, Ed wanted a selfie with the stone.
Oh, definitely. I got lots of pictures. But it was amazing when I looked at the stones because, one, you can literally touch them. I couldn't believe you could touch them. And it was as if they had been inscribed yesterday. I mean, they were not. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we were the immediate beneficiaries of that because we came off the Ignatian Way and Ed brought us right to those 2 stones before we went up to where the jail was and we had our lesson, right? And so he gave us sort of that backstory there, which really made his lesson, come to life.
I know.
Yeah, it was incredible.
That was amazing.
It was a kiss from God, for sure. For me and for all of us.
I could tell you were happy.
Yeah, it was great.
It was a great day. Just tell me about the spiritual impact that it's had on you to come here to see in real life what we read about and imagine mentally. What do you think it does for your faith and for people who maybe are thinking about coming to visit?
I just think about Paul's courage. Coming in the road, seeing this intimidating forum on his left, knowing that he's on a mission and, like Ed said, diverting from, going into the synagogues, but probably being pretty frightened, but just having the courage and having the convictions.
Right.
These people need to hear this message. Right. I'm gonna deny my fear. I've got the Lord with me in the face of what would really intimidate all of us. And I just think about my life. What intimidates me?
Right.
Going and sharing my faith with a stranger
Right.
in a grocery store, or striking up a conversation with my neighbor who just shut the lawnmower off. Really not that intimidating,
Right.
comparatively.
Yes.
And it inspires me and it convicts me that the little things that hold me back, I mean, they're nothing.
Absolutely. I agree. Shawn, Red.
You know who might also have seen a lot of those same guards and those same soldiers down in Jerusalem? It's not just Jesus, but Paul. Paul
That's
was
right.
a rabid Pharisee
That's right.
down there. He may not have treated some of those guys so well.
Right.
He probably had some pretty nasty interactions. And if he's going to see him, he's going to see him back here in Philippi.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a little bit of the familiar tried and true of the synagogue. So he's a fish out of water.
Yeah.
And he's probably trying to share the gospel now with some people that he may not have been so kind to before.
Yeah.
It must have been a really interesting mission field for him.
Yeah.
Wow.
To me, any were you going to share?
I can wait.
Okay. It just, I wasn't expecting this trip. I was so busy with my church, getting prepared to leave. I just kind of like jumped on a plane, I know we're going somewhere in Europe. And then just kind of parachute into this has been so like overwhelming at times. It's like, oh my gosh, is this real life? To see these actual places where the Apostle Paul went to, and to actually know for certain, okay, he was here or he was imprisoned here. It's faith building. It's mind blowing. It's a game changer. I'm kind of running out of superlatives to describe it. It sounds like I'm on a broken record, but it's like,
No, you're doing well.
It is so thrilling. It just shows me how it's really good in a very humbling way about how you set limits. You think you're doing good spiritually, then you realize, okay, you're not even. You're in. Middle school football. Paul he's playing D1, first string. We were just talking about there's so much room to grow in terms of conviction, passion for Christ, willingness to carry the cross. It's just absolutely challenging and inspiring spiritually.
Amen.
Okay, so let's just kind of recap the entire 3 days. Shawn, you happy how it turned out?
Yeah, I think God really blessed, from the things we can't control, like the weather and all that stuff, to the things we could control. And it went really, really well. I think two things for me that impacted my heart the most. I think one is just keeping the big picture in mind. And what do I mean by that? The synagogues that were built because of all the oppression or all the bad things that happened is what set us up for Christianity, right? If the temple would have never, if the synagogues weren't everywhere, the big picture of the synagogue is here, it's here, it's here, setting it up for Christianity, right? So God was doing something bigger all along.
Right.
We just didn't know what it was. And the seeing the Seventh Legion and all these things, they all came together at a later point so that people could know Christ.
Right.
And I think thanks to the news and cultures, we put so much emphasis on this is really bad, or what is God doing, but God's always working.
He's always working.
Always working. Don't make the judgment too quick that something's wrong. God will work through this. It'll
That's
actually
right.
turn for the good.
Right.
Amen.
You just have to keep the big picture. And
Yes.
I think that's why Paul can sing in prison, because
Right.
he didn't view what was happening as bad. He just knew somehow this was going to get used
Exactly.
to save souls.
Yep.
And lastly, I think I found myself in the Bible. Sometimes you see a character in the Bible and you think, oh, I want to be like him. And I think I found myself, my new role is the man of Macedonia. Because
And
I
why?
feel like-
And Shawn, why is that?
feel like I'm standing at this road saying, come to Eastern Europe, come to Eastern, we need you.
That's
we
right.
need you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I did just want to thank God and on this podcast just for you, Rob, because I've felt your support and encouragement about the work we're doing with small churches, getting more churches planted. Let's get out there. Let's get the gospel spread. And you've always pulled us on, and you've always talked about Revive, and you've always tried to help us keep that mission going.
Yeah.
And to have Ed here and Mark here. The McCunes have been in the ministry forever, and now they're here 10 months.
Praise God.
As soon as they retired, they're like, let's go help these churches in Eastern Europe. And to have the Antons with us in the European Mission Society, to have Ed and Deb just pouring their hearts out to all these churches. It's you're very much in the role of Paul at this moment for this region of getting to all the churches and strengthening them and encouraging them. And I feel like I'm no longer alone on the road to Macedonia.
That's right. That's right.
I have these heroes, and not just these heroes, but so many of you watching, and this whole team. They quit their jobs.
I know.
They left their security. Yeah. They're draining their savings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To stop somebody on a bus and speak a language they don't.
Yeah.
And to try and just save a soul. It's so moving to me. So I'm inspired.
If someone's on the edge, kind of thinking, "Ooh, that'd be cool," but I'm scared, what would you tell that person?
I would say go for it. And the reason I would say that is because on Revive, it's really hard not to do well. Because there's such a buffer. There's such a source of encouragement and teaching. We take from baby Christians to the to the elderly, like everybody fits. And people notice that when they come to Revive the first time, they're like, wait a minute, you got a 17-year-old and you got a 60-year-old. You got someone who's dying to go into the ministry. You have someone who's never even dreamed or even wants to go in the ministry, but they're still like. Everybody fits.
Yeah.
You just don't have to be the radical missionary. You don't have to be some Paul figure in your head.
Right.
Yeah. Come over, and all we're going to do is love God, love each other, and then pour it into somebody else's lap.
Just make yourself available.
Yeah.
Yes.
It'll be the greatest experience. And I'm so happy you're coming back with us to Sophia, because this is very special. But you'll also see the normal Revive life is very, it's special.
Amen.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's
It's
inspiring.
been fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, Shawn. And thank you so much for bringing these places to life. I mean, if I just walked into a place that's strewn with boulders, and it'd be powerful, it'd be great. But you brought it to life and brought the passion, the intensity. You just kind of resurrected those dead bones and really, really helped me. So thank you so much for the impact. It's been a great time. I mean, I read the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and that whole area is just covered with history. And you're talking about Cassius and Brutus and the assassination attempt, and how the battle was held right there. I mean, right there on those plains, you could see it. You go, perfect place to have a battle right there. And then you talked about the battle of Actium, where the naval battle where Cleopatra and Mark Antony had fought against Octavius, and it's just it's really hard to kind of encapsulate. So,
amen. And there's one other thing, just on a bit of a side note to echo on that, and that is coming to Revive, which is where we all are right now. There's an ecosystem, there's an infrastructure that you enter into, and you may think, can I do this? And I think everyone realizes, oh my goodness, I can do this, because I'm entering into this beautiful culture of love and high faith, and it's infectious. It is not difficult to kind of rise to that standard, because the Spirit, 1 Corinthians 3:16, is flowing among everyone. And there's nothing, I mean, who wouldn't want to have that experience? So if you're at a point in life where, especially if you're an empty nester and you've got some latitude, my goodness, don't just kind of ride it out right now.
No way.
Please don't just ride it out. Really, really just sign on up and be amazed at the new adolescence that'll come your way.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, you're 65. Do you
64.
60. Okay, thank you. When I get old, when I turn 64, it doesn't seem like you have any regrets about deciding to come out here.
No, none at all. Our son was on the first two Revives, totally inspired us. Amen. We knew we were getting near the end of retirement, and the month after we retired, we threw our hats in the ring. It took us no time at all. And it's really why we wanted to retire a little bit earlier.
That's right.
Because we couldn't wait to do this. But I'd also say, like Shawn said, just go for it. Also, talk to some people that are doing it or have done it. I remember talking to Chris and Ann Estathian, in the Boston area, and they just inspired us from an older person's perspective.
That's right.
And Annie and I we talked to a couple in Chicago a couple months ago that were, getting their application together. I remember Don and Mia Lee in Seattle starting conversations maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And, no, I just echo everything that, the goal in the Christian life is just keep moving, it's not just keep moving, it's keep growing, keep stretching your faith, keep putting it into practice, working it out. We must do that, but really there's no more joyful life.
Ed, Mark, Shawn, thank you so much. It's been a great week, and thank you so much for all you brought. Really appreciate the time here.
That's been awesome. Thanks.
Thank you,
bro.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First, let your friends know about the podcast. Secondly, read and review one of my books, either How to Plant and Grow a Church or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. You can find both of them on Amazon.com. Or you can support the program with a gift today. The link is in the show notes, because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no-regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.